I love Magic the Gathering, I am Loki the Gamer, and these are my homemade cards based off of Weekend at Bernie's. Now, you know what, each time that I joke about something like that, I gotta be careful with the universes beyond going as crazy as they have been lately. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the jokes that I make actually turned out to be actual sets. So anyway, this is obviously another video on my Civilization 6 themed cards. And this time we are looking at Russia. There will be one legendary land, one leader card, 2 unique builds, 1 card based off the leader's agenda, and a bonus card, for the grand and usual total of 6. So in Russia, there will be faith. So if we look at our chart here, faith translates to a number of things, but I chose something quite unique and different this time. I decided that faith, and especially religious conversion, would be treated as switching colors of creatures. So creatures switching colors, and eventually it would lead to a religious victory. There will also be free land, so the Russian people get extra land tiles for free, and you can expect that to mean fetching lands from your library. So upon founding cities, the Russians will get free land. Now, what does it mean to found a city? Sometimes I've interpreted that to mean landfall, so when you get a new land in play, that's a new city. But sometimes I've interpreted that as creatures. So whenever a creature drops, that represents founding a new city. And that is what I chose for Russia. So when a creature enters the battlefield under their control, that represents founding a city. So that's when the free land fetch will happen. There'll be the concept of weather, so blizzards. Blizzards will translate to snow sources. So damage from snow sources will be either enhanced or you will gain protection from snow sources. So the blizzard weather, that'll simply mean snow, the snow super type. There will be science and culture boosts. Science will of course mean card draw. Culture normally is a very defensive ability because you are a pacifist, you are able to deter your enemies from attacking you because they are in love with your culture, they don't attack you, they come visit your land, you have tourism. That's normally the logic, but this time for Russia, I felt it more appropriate that I did something different, like completely different, and something much more aggressive. And I turned culture into direct damage. That wasn't me really using logic, you know, transforming Civ 6 concept into magic. It was really more me being true to the nature of the colors that I chose for Russia. So I voluntarily stepped away a little bit from the logic of the civilization in order to make a better, more satisfying set of magic cards here. And finally, there will be the concept of trading with more advanced people. Well, advanced in terms of science and culture. Science especially, I decided to focus on the science advancement. And science meaning card draw, well, someone who is more advanced than you either means that they have more cards in hand than you, or that they've drawn a lot of cards this turn. So that's an overview of Russia. There are many things, many different moving parts, perhaps a little too many things, but I think that just means that there are many different ways of building a potential Russian deck. And you have to simply rely not so much on the cards that I made, but on existing cards in Magic to make your deck all that it can be. The color identity of Russia will be black, red, and green. The sheer size of the land calls for green for sure, growth, landfall, and in fact red is also the next best color for landfall, I believe, so red also fits, and the very barbaric different tribes of Russia seem to call for red, and black. There's always been a little bit of shadiness in the Russian history, so black seems appropriate, so we've got a Jund color scheme, black, red, green. Now, Russia, the land of Russia in Civilization, has the following ability. Mother Russia says, extra territory upon founding cities, extra faith and extra production from tundra. Units do not receive damage from blizzards. Civilizations that are at war with Russia receive double damage from blizzards in Russian territory. So I rolled all of that into one very neat Russian land, the legendary Snow Land. Of course, it's a snow land. Mythic rare. It does many things. Hopefully, it's balanced. Let's find out. So, Mother Russia says, creatures you control have, when this creature enters, you may pay 1 snow. If you do, search your library for a snowland, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. So that is the extra land grab that you get upon founding cities. And if you'll remember, I defined founding cities, in Russia's case, as dropping a creature. So yeah, all your creatures enable you to go fetch a land. Now, I think that's balanced because A, it's not free. You gotta pay mana, and it's specifically snow mana. So, of course, typically you will have loaded your deck with snow mana, but you may not necessarily have all the snow mana that you need, that you want at the beginning of the game when your land base is very limited, because, hey, you need lots of dual lands if you're playing all 3 colors of Russia. And look, this land is only usable by someone who has all 3 colors of Russia. It has the color identity of black, red, and green. If you scroll at the bottom of the card, you'll see the 3 mana pips are there. So you do need 3 colors at least in your deck to use this land. So therefore, yeah, you may have some dual lands that are not obviously snow land. So who knows if you actually have enough snow mana to actually pay for that. So yeah, it's not free. And also the extra land must be snow. So eventually, who knows, you might run out of snow lands to fetch from your deck. And finally, you put it in your hand. It doesn't go straight into play, not even tapped. So I think it's fairly balanced. You don't get extra land drops from this. You don't get extra ramp from this. So you simply load up your hand with lands so you don't miss a drop. That's it. And plus, you know, after you've summoned a creature, you may be tapped out. Maybe you have plenty of snow mana available, but you've used it all to summon your creature. So that's another possible outcome. And you've got then the concept of blizzards. So for 1 snow mana and a green and tap Russia, so it's not that cheap really, the next time a snow source would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage instead. So with that ability, you get to really effectively deal double damage to your opponents from blizzards. Blizzards being, of course, in this case, snow sources. And the ability doesn't stop there because you yourself need to be immune to snow damage. So the ability goes on to say, target creature against protection from snow until end of turn. So you could conceivably activate this ability not because you yourself intended to deal snow damage, but because you need the snow protection for whatever reason, and then your own creature will receive double damage because of this ability, but you don't care because you've given it protection anyway. So there you go, the protection is unlikely to be of any use, really, but if you yourself load your deck with the snow damage sources, then maybe this double damage ability could be very useful. So that's one way already of taking the strategy, is by loading your deck with the snow damage and relying on the Russia double damage ability. And finally, I wanted to represent the production bonus of Tundras without making too strong, and also the faith bonus of said Tundras. So therefore, there's a final ability that says tap Russia and tap 2 untapped snowlands you control, so again reliance on snowlands. So you've tapped a grand total of 3 lands, Russia itself plus 2, and the result is add 3 mana, 1 of each. So you get a very good fixing, so 1 of each color of your deck that can really help with your mana fixing, and you didn't actually get to ramp from this, so it's balanced, I feel. And then the faith bonus is something that will look a little counterintuitive. Okay, how is this useful? You'll see later. Target creature becomes the color of your choice in addition to its other colors until end of turn. So what is the point of that? Well, don't forget, in the overview we said that faith for Russia will translate into switching the colors of creatures. That represents converting people to your religion. So religion is like a color, and with that ability you get to temporarily, only temporarily mind you, convert someone to your religion, quote quote. And what is the point of that? How do you turn that into a victory? There's another card in the Russian pack that will guarantee that. So this little mana fixing ability of Russia helps in its own way towards that victory type. So there's your production and faith bonus. So there's all Russia wrapped into one land that I think, despite it doing a lot of things, is fairly balanced. Because it relies on other things to actually become game-changing. Doesn't do it by itself. Now the leader of Russia will of course be Peter the Great. And he has an ability called the Great Embassy. He received extra science and culture, so that'll turn into card draw and, yes, unusually pinging direct damage from trade routes to civilizations that are more advanced than Russia. More advanced in tech or civic, but of course, again, I chose to ignore civic and only focus on tech, so therefore we are going to rely on card draw. So let's take a look at Peter the Great. Green, red, black, 2 generic. You have a rare human noble advisor, one of the many advisors that I created in this set. So basically, if a leader was nobility, I made them a noble for sure. So a king and an aristocrat of some kind, I made them a noble, and if they weren't, I made them an advisor. And yes, often I made them both, just like Peter here, part of the aristocracy, part of the monarchy, but also definitely a politician, so advisor. He's got both. I made 2 civs, one of them was Korea, and the other one I forget, but yes, I made at least 2 civs that would benefit from building an advisor tribal deck. So let's keep that in mind when looking at all these cards, because so many of my leaders I turned into advisors. So that's a little parentheses on Korea and that other civ, I forget which one. Anyway, let's take a look at Peter's The Great Embassy. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card and Peter deals 1 damage to any target. So there's your extra card draw, so when someone else truly is more advanced than you because they've drawn 2 cards in 1 turn, ooh, then you get to draw a card, and so there's your science boost and you get your culture boost, which is that unusual but color appropriate 1 damage. And what happens when someone is really more advanced than you? Well, whenever an opponent draws their 3rd card each turn, you draw 2 cards, and Peter deals 2 damage to any target. So if you've been keeping count, there's no way for an opponent to draw a 3rd card without first having gone through a 2nd one. So that means that if they've drawn 3 cards, you in response have drawn a total of also 3 cards and dealt a total of 3 damage to 2 potentially different targets. So it can get pretty nasty if your opponents have a pretty draw-centric deck, and let's face it, who doesn't these days? And to make matters worse, you yourself can ensure that your opponents draw cards not only during their turn, because let's face it, that's likely. Your opponents will often get extra draws during their turn, so you'll get your powers to trigger during their turn, but why not find a way to make their powers trigger during your turn too? So if you have a lot of wheels effects, which totally do fit in this color scheme, so if you make them draw cards during your turn, then your Russian abilities will trigger really every turn. During their turn, during your turn, you'll be swarming in cards and pinging damage. And that is a wonderful direction in which one might want to take a Russian deck by relying on Peter's abilities. Sure, there's the whole snow-land synergy, and there will be more on that a little later. And there's this whole religious conversion concept about switching colors of creatures that we mentioned before. Those are great strategies, but why not rely specifically on what your commander has? So, lots of pinging, lots of card draws, wheels effect to make sure that your opponents draw cards even if they don't want to. So yeah, that is potentially the best way to build that deck. But let's see what else is in my Russian bundle. The unique unit of Russia is the Cossack. It is a mounted unit, so yes, even though the artwork doesn't reflect that, it is indeed a mounted unit. It replaces the cavalry, so definitely a mounted unit, so you can expect the horse creature type to show up like usual. I made it a snow creature, so that is a potential snow source of damage that you might want to double with the Russian land. So there's a little bit of synergy there, but again, nothing to do with what the commander does. So perhaps save that synergy for a different deck, one with a commander that actually cares about snow damage sources and things like that. And the Cossack unit receives a bonus when it fights in its homeland or next to its homeland. So that was very easy to turn that into an ability. There was one more unique unit, I forget whose exactly, that got bonuses for fighting at home. Well, the concept of fighting at home is easy to turn that into a magic concept. It's when you block. When you block, it's assumed that you are at home. So there you go. I turned it into a bonus when you are blocking. But I didn't make it into a stats bonus. I didn't increase its stats. You know, like when this creature blocks, it gets +2/+2 until enough turns, something like that. No, I made it do some direct damage when blocking. So that's yet another way that a snow source could deal damage, not only by it fighting in combat, but also with this triggered ability. When it blocks, boom, another direct damage, and that damage is indeed another snow source. So, hey, more snow source damage. And the unit in Civ 6 can move after attacking, so I also gave it something that triggers when it attacks, specifically when it deals excess damage. So there's the Cossack, 5 mana, you've got a common human horse warrior, 3/4. When this creature blocks, it deals 2 damage to target creature, so there's your direct damage when it blocks, when it fights at home. And when this creature deals excess damage to a blocking creature, its mustache grows. No, I'm sorry. Untap target creature. So I gave it a self untap. Actually, it doesn't have to be self, it's any creature. So I gave it an untap ability to reflect the fact that it can still move after attacking. So basically it attacked so well that it did excess damage, and now it can still move. It'll use that movement to come back home and untap itself, or potentially someone else. So the point is, after attacking, it can move and come back home. Which is great because it's got that awesome blocking ability. So it is like Vigilance, but it's better than that because it could potentially untap someone else. So it's super Vigilance. It's like Mad-Eye Moody, constant Vigilance. The Lavra. Now this is where things get interesting. So anyone who plays Civilization 6, who've played Russia, or even played against Russia, you know how much of a powerhouse they really are, especially for religious victories. And it is not necessarily thanks to the Russian power that we talked about and Peter's abilities, it's really the Lavra. That is the disgustingly OP aspect of Russia, is their unique district. The one that replaces the holy site. So of course it generates a lot of faith. It's got amazing adjacency for mountains and woods, just like a holy site always does, but it generates a crazy amount of great people points, so not just great profits, but great artists of all kinds. It's crazy, and it's cheap to build, so it's in your best interest to develop cities early. Every city needs a Lavra, and you'll be generating faith and popping great people like you wouldn't believe, and pick Dance of the Aurora as your pantheon, and now even production is nuts. So yes, it's just very easy to run a good game with Russia. I believe that my shortest game ever on DET was with Russia, and it was of course a religious victory on turn 100 and something, I forget. So yes, pretty crazy. And yes, the Lavra is at the heart of all this. So I made it quite game-changing. Hopefully I made it costly enough. So yes, game-changing, but balanced. You tell me. It is one of the few ways that a player could potentially achieve victory through an alternate winning condition. I did that for the Canadian land. A bit crazy to put an alternate win con on a land, but I did that for Canada to represent the diplomatic victory. I gave Greece an alternate win con to represent a culture victory. Now, if you thought that putting an alternate win con on a land was crazy and dangerous, well, I think it's even worse with Greece because I put it directly on the commander. And to represent a domination victory, well, I don't need to put an alternate win con. That's just beat down. That's just winning by bringing your opponent down to 0 life or commander damage. So that victory speaks for itself. And so far I didn't do anything about science victory, because normally if you draw a whole lot, that's because you are generally deserving of a win anyways, and you will probably get there if you truly draw more than your opponent, if your science is that good. So if you've drawn that many cards and you haven't found a way to win, maybe you don't deserve to. So I'm not gonna give you an alternate win con just because you've drawn a lot. It's up to you to use those cards that you've drawn and actually win. But here is the religious victory, the Lavra. So, and here's all of this color changing shenanigans will finally come into being. For 7 mana, 2 green and 5 generic, you've got a rare artifact. So yes, it's an improvement on the land, it's a district. Most of those have been turned into land auras, but this one I turned into an artifact. I felt it more appropriate, it's easier to remove also, so since it's such a game-changing thing, your opponents can totally do something about it. So let's take a look at it. When it enters, choose a color. Lavra costs 1 less to cast if you control a forest. It costs 2 less to cast if you control a mountain, so yes, that 7 could potentially go down to 4, so still expensive, but not so bad. And then for 4 mana, now that's expensive, you tap it and create 2 advisor creature tokens of the chosen color. And they have 2 important things. They have protection from the chosen color, and tap. Target creature becomes the chosen color in addition to its other colors. And this, unlike the Russia land ability, doesn't end until end of turn, so it's permanent. Then, if all creatures share a color, you win the game. So if all creatures on the battlefield share a color, that represents the fact that you have converted them all. So all of your creatures, hopefully they share a color, and if they don't, then you'll need to convert them yourself. And then you need to make sure to convert all other creatures on the battlefield, and then you win the game. So since this costs rather a lot to cast and to use, you're unlikely to do that very early. And don't forget, those advisors that you create, well, they only tap to use their ability, so no extra cost, no extra mana cost, so it's cheap. But surely that's the point, they must tap, so they can't even do that on the turn that they enter unless you give them haste. So there we go, so it's a long-term thing. But if you build a huge army of those advisors, so it might take you a while, but at first you've got 2, then you've got 4, then you've got 6, and they can keep turning more and more and more creatures into your chosen color, then sure enough, eventually you will win the game. Your opponents will have to either keep killing your advisors or keep dropping more creatures, more and more creatures that aren't of that color. For example, if your opponent has a Krenko and for some dumb reason you didn't choose red as your chosen color of conversion, then you might actually not be able to keep up with them. They'll make more red goblins quicker than you can make some advisors that turn them all into white or whatever. So it could be a race, but also, yeah, your choice of color is all important. If you think that your opponents will start to swarm with creature tokens or anything like that, then pick the color that matches their creature tokens. The worst that can happen is if they start swarming you with colorless creatures. Then you will have to turn every single one. You can't simply latch upon the color that they already have. Because, well, they ain't got one, they're colorless. But yeah, there's a number of ways that this could work. It's also easy to foil and make sure that it doesn't work, so that's why I think it's not that crazy, it's not that powerful. And another way of winning with this is to do a board wipe. You do a board wipe and you create advisors, you trigger them, and you've won, because there are no other creatures, or at least very few. After a board wipe, it takes a little while for people to rebuild their strength. So yes, you can easily pop some new advisors that will turn whoever has come back or has survived and win the game. So board wipe can totally be your friends here. And so can haste, as we've already discussed, because your advisors can get to work that much faster. Unlike the Greek alternate win con, I didn't specify that a minimum amount of creatures had to exist on the battlefield. With Greece, it says, if all creatures are goaded and there's at least 4 or more among your opponents, then you win the game. So I added the and there's at least 4 or more, otherwise you could win just by having no one around. For Russia, however, I didn't put a clause like that, so if there really is no one around, then the next time you use one of your advisors, you win the game. So it's expensive and could take a while, but it's less restrictive than that Greek victory. And also, don't forget about these civilizations that care about advisors. If you have, like Korea, an advisor tribal deck, then an artifact that just poops extra advisors could totally be your thing. That's a bad example because Korea doesn't have green, if I remember correctly, so you wouldn't be able to use the Lavra in your Korean deck, but that other civilization that cares about advisors, I really can't remember which one it is. But anyway, maybe it has green, maybe the Lavra could go in that deck. Worth looking up. Before we move on to the agenda card, I want to say something about the fact that you also get to expand your borders whenever a great person is used in a city with a Lavra. So, as if it didn't have enough powers already in Civ 6, yes, you get to do that. When you use up a great person in a city with a Lavra, you get free land. Your borders expand by themselves for free. So I easily could have turned that into something that triggers upon the death of a legendary creature. So whenever a legendary creature you control dies, you get to do something similar to the legendary land of Russia. So fetch some lands, either snow lands or regular lands, from your library, drop them on the battlefield or in your hand, something like that. But as easily as this ability would have been to write, to create into a magic ability, it practically wrote itself. It's so instinctive. I chose not to include it on the Lavra. It already had more than enough going for itself. So now the agenda card. Peter's agenda is called Westernizer. Just like his ability says, really. He likes it when others are more advanced than him. And he dislikes those who are behind him in tech and civics. But again, we chose to focus on techs. So I made a card that rewards you and others for being advanced and penalizes those who are behind you. And I decided to treat the concept of being advanced not in how many cards you've drawn, but in how many cards you have in hand right now. So it's an uncommon sorcery, 2 red, 2 black, 1 generic, that says players who have fewer cards in hand than you each sacrifice a number of creatures equal to the number of cards in your hand. So you are greatly incentivized to draw a whole bunch of cards and then play that. So whoever has fewer than you, which is likely during your turn, in a turn in which you drew a lot of cards, then all those players will have to sacrifice a whole bunch of creatures. And then I had to make sure that it also rewarded those that were advanced. So it says players who have as many as or more cards in hand than you. Now, as written, mathematically, that implies that it includes you. But to make it crystal clear, I added it in parentheses here, so that includes you. May each untap a number of creatures they control equal to the number of cards in their hand. So their reward is not as huge, I think, as the penalty. But still, that can still work very well in your deck, in a Russian deck, because untapping creatures means that you might get to untap your advisors and use them again, so that can really secure you a victory if you get to have a whole bunch of those advisors from your Lavra in play, and you untap them. Boom. Extra conversion and victory at hand. And finally, normally I don't struggle very much to create a bonus card. Normally, not every bundle even needs one. Those civs that have extra leaders and more unique builds and things like that, then they don't even need a bonus card. All 6 card slots are filled with their own concepts. But when I must use my imagination to create that 6th card, I'm normally excited. I get to, use this awesome Civilization 6 concept, and I'll stick it into that bundle because it's very relevant to that bundle. But for Russia, nothing was coming to mind until I looked for inspiration on the Civilopedia page of Russia and discovered that the brooch on Peter's chest is the brooch of the Order of St. Andrew, which he created. So there we go, I made a card out of that, simply. Didn't really have to research much about that order. I said, hey, there we go, I'll focus on the brooch, that'll be the artwork for the card, and that'll be the name of the card. And the Order of St. Andrew, it's an uncommon for 3, 1 red and 2 generic, that says, Each player discards as many cards as the number of creatures they control, or as many as they have in hand, whichever is lesser. Then draw that many cards. So it's a wheel. As we've said, wheel effects are amazing with Peter because you force opponents to draw cards. Well, first they have to discard, and the more creatures they have, the more they'll have to discard, and then they draw a whole bunch more. So you get to force them to draw, which really feeds into Peter's ability. So that is very neat, and it's an instant, so you can cast that during your turn or an opponent's turn, whenever you want to trigger Peter's ability and get your bonus draws and your bonus damage. So there we go, that completes the bundle, and as we've said, there are many different moving parts, but I feel that the best ones are those just like this one. So extra draw, wheels effect in order to force your opponents to draw, rely essentially on your commander. He's your one reliable card, relying on the Lavra for that religious victory, or those snow damage sources and the Land of Russia to help enhance both of these strategies. Sure, it's a thing, but is it really the best thing for your commander? There are probably other commanders out there who will tap into those strategies a bit better, but I feel that the best thing to do with Peter is indeed to make everyone draw cards, and you benefit from that. What do you think? What else have I not thought of? What about giving Peter Death Touch? All of his pinging turns into instant death, so that's something else to keep in mind. Let me know what you think about the Russian bundle. Did it meet your expectations? Are you going crazy thinking about that Lavra? In which other deck would you put something like that to foster a religious victory? Let me know in the comments, and Loki the Gamer, as always, thanks you for liking, subscribing, and if time permits, kneeling also.